sun's gone away, and with candles for lights, 'tis the perfect array for demonic delights. When day turns to night, and wrong turns to right, then you may set your sight on demonic delight. A sudden flash of lightning, something shocking and frightening, can only in demonic dark be delightfully enlightening. A sense of apprehension towards removal of perception is the truest foe of all who wish to know. You're never alone in the dark. You can never outrun the ones hiding behind your eyes. When you let your mind quiet, you can hear us. There is no need to fear us. An eye is a door that swings both ways. And I shouldn't finish this poem. This is a continuation of my reading of Mr. LaVey's Satanic Bible. It has been a really wild few weeks, and not just for me, obviously. In fact, there's someone that I know who's been having a lot of rough times recently, and she has an affinity for making ASMR. Thus, I've decided to carry this very relaxed, if you could call it that, tone through the remainder of tonight's reading. You know, a little quid pro quo. I'll show you mine if you show me yours, type of thing. I remember there was a whole bunch of stuff that I wanted to look up, and I haven't done it. Like I said, it's been a really wild couple of weeks. A lot of different things happening. Learned a lot, just not a lot necessarily related to the understanding of this particular book. I still have all of the notes written down. I should have a cup of tea. I know that my voice quality tends to wane over the course of 3 hours of giving my thoughts on a book. Shame on the person who lays claim to their thoughts. It's like a book doesn't belong to a printing press. I've been sculpting with porcelain. I'm wondering what sort of sounds it will make when it's done. Even for those who don't get ASMR, I feel like there's a lot of peace to be attained by just appreciating the sounds around you. judgment, without even perhaps trying to figure out what's making them. Although, for self-preservation's sake, this isn't something to be practiced always. There needs to be a sense of trust involved. But just learning to be pleasant in the moment in general is a good idea. I gave up tea for a long time because I was overusing it. But it turns out that caffeine, it's like, for me, self-medication for depression. I prefer to go for some loose leaf. I've spent a few years as a tea snob. Who knows, maybe I still am one. But bags are cheaper. I'm really bummed out. I got some Darjeeling, and the horrible things they did to those leaves to try to fit it into a bag. Yeah, I'm still a snob. Tonight, I am having a rubus mixture, which, as you might know, is not caffeinated. Like I said, I'm just trying to stop a drought from happening at the moment. I love the sound of pouring water. This thing empties out far too quickly, so I'm not going to pour again. Although, if I had more presence of mind, I would have done it in front of the camera. Presence of mind. That's another funny phrase related to the poem that I wrote. If you could call it a poem, it's very, very lightly edited series of funny rhymes I thought of that just happened to be thematically connected by the coincidence of just the way that my thoughts connect. You can say a web of thoughts, and neurologically speaking, that is correct. Neural pathways, neural rivers, all the rest. I feel like you can get lost in that loop of running on whatever river you happen to be floating down, and by describing the curves of the river, you forget to steer the boat. It can lead to some fun places. In the same way that you can set your mind to a task, like pouring tea, and forget the broader picture of providing entertainment to the person that you're with. And you're never alone in the dark. Entertainment need not be provided. All of the thoughts that I bring to you now are thoughts you could easily have yourself. This book by Mr. LaVey, his ideas are not his alone. It's just the specific way that Mr. LaVey delivered them and other things too. I guess that river ended in a waterfall. Now, where are we? Indulgence, not compulsion. It's a very worn book. It's followed my friend through a lot of hard times. I've lent him a book of my own. Sort of a compliment to this. Oh yeah, I mentioned this several weeks ago when I last recorded. The highest plateau of human development is the awareness of the flesh. Satanism encourages its followers to indulge in their natural desires. Only by doing so can you be a completely satisfied person with no frustrations which can be harmful to yourself and others around you. Therefore, the most simplified description of the Satanic belief is indulgence instead of abstinence. People often mistake compulsion for indulgence, but there is a world of difference between the two. A compulsion is never created by indulging, but by not being able to indulge. By making something taboo, it only serves to intensify the desire. Everyone likes to do the things they've been told not to do. Forbidden fruits are sweetest. Webster's Encyclopedic Dictionary defines indulgence thusly: to give oneself up to, not to restrain or oppose, to give free course to gratify by compliance, to yield to. The dictionary definition of compulsion is the act of compelling or driving by force, physical or moral, the constraint of the will, compulsory, obligatory. In other words, indulgence implies choice, whereas compulsion indicates lack of choice. When a person has no proper release for his desires, they rapidly build up and become compulsions. If everyone had a particular time and place for the purpose of periodically indulging in their personal desires, without fear of embarrassment or reproach, they would be sufficiently released to lead unfrustrated lives in the everyday world. They would be free to plunge headlong into whatever undertaking they might choose, instead of going about their duties half-heartedly, the creative urges frustrated by denying their natural desires. This would apply in the majority of cases, but there will always be those who work better under pressure. Generally, those who need to endure a certain amount of hardship to produce their full capabilities are in basically artistic vocations. More will be said later about the fulfillment through self-denial. This does not mean to imply that all artists fit into this category. On the contrary, many artists are unable to produce unless their basic animal needs have been satisfied. For the most part, it is not the artist or individualist, but the average middle-class working man or woman who is lacking the proper release for their desires. It is ironic that the responsible, respectable person the one who pays society's bills, should be given the least in return. It is he who must be ever conscious of his moral obligations, and who is condemned for normally indulging in his natural desires. The Satanic religion considers this a gross indulgence. He who upholds his responsibilities should be most entitled to the pleasures of his choice, without censure from the society he serves. Service done out of love for another requires no reward. But, as long as nobody's hurting themselves in the process, no harm in accepting gratitude. Let's see, something else here. I'm thinking a lot while reading this about addiction. When your compulsion will never be satisfied and you're just stuck in a loop over and over and over again. And you can never really have satisfaction, and every time you need more. And you can be compelled toward an indulgence. Let's see. They're using the indulgence as an infinitive verb, but you can also use it as a noun. We're talking here about different types of desires. So I suppose I shouldn't too closely examine his linguistic framework unless I find it lacking. See if I can communicate what I'm trying to say using Mr. LeVay's linguistic framework here. Well, and purportedly Webster's Encyclopedic Dictionary's linguistic framework. I've forgotten even what I meant to be saying. But hopefully, you, dear viewer, can listen between the lines, so to speak. I could have mentioned what I was thinking as I was reading it. However, I thought that for the sake of properly continuing along with this book, that all too frequent breaks would not be the best thing and distract from the greater message Mr. LeVay is trying to say. The other folk who have performed this book, of which there are many, and I'm sure they are quite talented, though I think I bring something unique to the mix here. They are usually done in less than 10 hours, and I'm rapidly approaching that point, only having made a quarter, perhaps. I don't want to do the math at the moment, just eyeballing it, you know. And considering that at this present moment I lose track of where I am on my mental river, or train of thought, train tracks, rivers, roads, pathways, all in the same, probably should bring light to my thoughts upon their discovery. There we go. Every last drop of liquid here is important to me. If the tea bag weren't so hot, I'd swallow it right up. Well, to remove the moisture. I've seen people put things in their mouths on camera. See if I can get some good noise out of this. Yeah. That wasn't even that pleasurable. I've removed most of the moisture. But that nice earthy aftertaste. Alright. I want the actual the actual good stuff here. I would if it weren't so hot. It's embarrassment. A fire eater being brought down by hot water. Although once you know the mechanics of how it works, makes perfect sense. Chemically speaking, water is very resistant to changes in temperature. There's a name for that chemical property. And I've forgotten what it is. You put insulation in your walls, that has nothing to do with the name. Insolubility? No, that's related to the creation of solutions. And you know, we talk about water a lot as a solvent, but what about water as a solute? It tends to disperse. I'm getting so far off track. I'm sorry. What's with me tonight? I think it's because, and I even realized this in the not so whispery I made this afternoon in response to an argument. I'm seeking here to create a mystique, for sure, but it's supposed to be communication. Part of why I don't like to rely on scripts, and you can be performative and also genuine. And so what ends up happening is that I end up talking to everyone and no one. And I guess that gets me everywhere and nowhere. Considering that this particular video is also supposed to be a sleep aid, who knows, maybe even my louder videos could be sleep aids. Suppose this meandering, natural, conversational, maybe, type of flow is conducive to the end goal of at least relaxing you, if not putting you to sleep. Sleep, 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 sleep. It's hard to do something wholeheartedly when you're not really sure where your heart lies. Even when you know what your end goal is, if each individual task along the way feels like you're not taking any real step towards where you want to be. decided to download a dating app once again after many, many, many years. This is brought on by some revelations about a lot of things. I won't go into detail here. I think I'm doing what I like. I'm talking to you out of indulgence, or since part of me wants to continue reading, am I talking to you out of compulsion? Doing what you want to do, seeking that release from doing what you don't want, that you haven't done it enough. But then it comes down to the human heart sometimes needing to be restrained. I think that maybe this was where I was going earlier, but I can't say for sure. If you just allow people to do only what they want, even people themselves sometimes don't want to do what they want to do. If you just let your rivers flow to their natural conclusions, intersecting and intertwining as they are, with no real destination in mind, and without steering the boat. It's come up a few times now. The thing that I've been trying to do for the past few weeks that's prevented me from making these videos, I was applying myself towards a new business opportunity, and I was rowing very hard, but try as I might, I couldn't really get a sense of focus. It was like I was always being pulled astray. I realized that, and this goes towards recontextualizing other failures in my life as well, that I'm not very good at steering my boat. That's a skill that I am determined to learn, but it's something that's certainly going to take time. And I'm not sure what level of indulgence I should give myself, what level of compulsion feeds into this. Finally, a religion, Satanism, has been formed which commends and rewards those who support the society in which they live, instead of denouncing them for their human needs. From every set of principles, be it religious, political, or philosophical, some good can be extracted. Amidst the madness of the Hitlerian concept, one point stands out as a shining example of this: strength through joy. Hitler was no fool when he offered the German people happiness on a personal level to ensure loyalty to him and peak efficiency from them. It has been clearly established that the majority of all illnesses are of a psychosomatic nature, and that psychosomatic illnesses are a direct result of frustration. It has been said, the good die young. The good Christian standards, by Christian standards, do die young. It is the frustration of our natural instincts which leads to the premature deterioration of our minds and bodies. It has become very fashionable to concentrate on the betterment of the mind and spirit, and to consider giving pleasure to one's body. the very shell with which the mind and spirit could not exist, to be coarse, crude, and unrefined. As of late, most people who deem themselves emancipated have left normalcy only to transcend into idiocy, by way of bending their behinds around to meet their navels, subsisting on wild and exotic diets like brown rice and tea. They feel they will arrive at a great state of spiritual development. Hogwash, says the Satanist. He would rather eat a good, hearty meal, exercise his imagination, and transcend by means of physical and emotional fulfillment. It seems to the Satanist that after being harnessed with unreasonable religious demands for so many centuries, one would welcome the chance to be human for once. This is my first, I could excuse everything else, but Mr. LeVay is dissing the rice diet. Rice is nice, it's flippin' delicious, and it is a springboard for all kinds of culinary exploration. And he calls tea hogwash? To each their own. And Mr. LeVay, of all people, shouldn't talk about leaving normalcy to transcend into idiocy. His whole thing, and I can't say that, I have far away from that chapter, is, but his past as a carny and the way that his religion has developed is about being performative and, in a sense, reactionary. So I feel like that's a little hypocritical. And it's true that frustration is going to shorten a person's lifespan in some senses if you're overwearing your body. The physical way that this works, of course, is adrenaline and hormones and all of the other effects that it has, like the shaking of your muscles. You're using your muscles when they shake, and they will eventually wear out. They can only repair themselves so much. However, the way to harden the body, mind, and spirit is through dedicated pushing through perseverance. What's it called? Striking an anvil to get a spark, you know? It's another phrase. I can't think of another phrase at the moment, but it is through destruction that creation happens. I had to make this lovely tea. Earth was dug out and pounded together and made into the glass. Thousands of miles of pipe needed to be laid for the water to make its way into my kettle. And all of the harm that came to the tea plant itself, well, rubus plant in this case, in order to be, for pleasure to be extracted from it. And perhaps you might consider that no, you wouldn't. Well, I'll finish my thought. A egregious pleasure that goes beyond simple means. But what do you call even the simplest pleasure? The growth, the muscular development means repeatedly, systematically, carefully breaking and harming of your muscle cells. I want to say tendons, but that's not the word. I just think about how they're stringy and they condense and decondense. It makes me think of a tendon. I don't know why. Something between the word and my own subconscious. I'm not tapping nearly enough for an ASMR video, but I don't know what the heck this is supposed to be. Certainly not ASMR. Suppose just normal sleep aid. But all that meant to say, frustration's good, and Mr. LeVay himself said just earlier in this very chapter that certain people require restriction for artistic fulfillment. It is by working with limitations that you can arrive at creative solutions. One of my candles went out. I will rectify this situation. Ha 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 ha. Hot wax dripping over the floor. Hot wax dripping under the door. Hot wax dripping under the seat. Hot wax dripping all over me. Hot wax. You know, here's an idea. How about instead of bringing flamed candle, let's bring candle to flame. No, that doesn't work. Altar lighters. Candle altar lighters. They're actually not the most flammable of wood. I only bought one large set, but I'm thinking that it might be better for me to just take sticks from my yard and dry them out myself. The funny sounds of burning wood. Watching the fires dance, watching the shadows dance. I want to say it's a universal pleasure, but really it's a human pleasure. Though there is no real distinction between what is human and what is the universe. No, that's not. No, that's true. That's fair to say. I don't want to get into that right now. There we go. 5 candles once again. If anyone thinks that by denying his natural desires he can avoid mediocrity, he should examine the Eastern mystical beliefs, which have been in great intellectual favor in recent years. Christianity is old hat, so those who wish to escape its fetters have turned to so-called enlightened religions, such as Buddhism. Although Christianity is certainly deserving of the criticism it has received, perhaps it has been taking more than its share of the blame. The followers of the mystical beliefs are every bit as guilty as the little humanism of the little humanisms as the misguided Christians. Humanisms. He's not, if anything, he's a proponent of humanist philosophy. Satanism and personal human development, I'd say, are closely tied. I'm not sure what he means. He hasn't made any statement about what is or is not humanist earlier in this book, regardless. Both religions are based on trite philosophies, but the mystical religionists profess to be enlightened and emancipated from the guilt-ridden dogma which is typified by Christianity. However, the Eastern mystic is even more preoccupied than the Christian with avoiding animalistic actions that remind him that he is not a saint, but merely a man, only in another form of animal, sometimes better, more often worse, than those who walk on all fours, and who, because of his divine, spiritual, intellectual development, has become the most vicious animal of all. The Satanist asks, what is wrong with being human? And having human limitations as well as assets? By denying his desires, the mystic has come no closer to overcoming compulsion than his kindred soul, the Christian. The Eastern mystical beliefs have taught people to contemplate their navels, stand on their heads, stare at blank walls, avoid the use of labels in life, and discipline themselves against any desire for materialistic pleasure. This is... Maybe I'm tired. I don't even know which particular mystical Eastern belief he's referring to, so that I could properly counter his argument. And I feel, as someone who's gained a lot from Eastern philosophies and practices, which are reflected in certain Western ideas as well, certainly not mainstream ones, that they're not being properly presented here. And maybe it's because they were not properly presented to Mr. LeVay, or they were explained through a Christian lens, or nonetheless. I feel like, no, I not feel like, I believe that all spiritual belief is about getting closer to yourself. And yourself would be a human. And sometimes the way to get closer to yourself is by removing extraneous, ephemeral, or inconsequential details. Looking deeper, 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 deeper. And closer, 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 closer to what the nature of truth and reality is. What you get from following each individual idea to its inevitable conclusion, instead of just going with your gut. Something that's common with Kantian moral development. Well, no, that's just one particular method used within the Kantian moral framework. Nevertheless, I'm sure you have seen just as many so-called disciplined yogis with the inability to control a smoking habit as anyone else, or just as many supposedly emancipated Buddhists become just as excited as a less aware person when they are confronted with a member of the opposite, or some cases the same, sex. Yet when asked to explain the reason for the hypocrisy, these people retreat into the ambiguousness which characterizes their faith. No one can pin them down if there are no straight answers that can be given. The fact of the matter is that the very thing which has led this type of person to a faith which preaches abstinence is indulgence. Their compulsive masochism is the reason for choosing a religion which not only advocates self-denial, but praises them for it, and gives them a sacrosanct avenue of expression for their masochistic needs. The more abuse they can stand, the holier they become. Ignoring the last part of that whole thing, yes, enlightenment is the end of the cycle, and the cycle is growth. And I say that escaping the cycle is a bad thing. This person would agree. Hunger, in and of itself, is not a virtue, but I'd say a necessity, and being able to control and contain that hunger, to recognize that you are already fulfilled and also will never be fulfilled. Well, I should say, should never allow yourself to be fulfilled, is what will promote everything. Social, moral, civilizational development. And recognizing that the framework by which the insatiable and the sated and the Satanist are all connected is based in love. Masochism, to most people, represents a rejection of indulgence. Satanism points out many meanings behind the meanings, and considers masochism to be an indulgence if any attempt to sway or change the person from his masochistic traits is met with resentment and or failure. The Satanist does not condemn these people for giving vent to their masochistic desires, but he does feel the utmost contempt towards those who cannot be honest enough, at least with themselves, to face and accept their masochism as a natural part of their personality makeup. I agree. Having to use religion as an excuse for their masochism is bad enough, but these people actually have the effrontery to feel superior to those who are not bound up in self-deceitful expression of their fetishes. These people would be the first to condemn a man who found his weekly release with a person who would beat him soundly, thereby releasing himself from the very thing which would, if unreleased, make him, as they are, a compulsive churchgoer or religious fanatic. By finding adequate release for his masochistic desires, he no longer needs to debase and deny himself in his every waking moment, as do these compulsive masochists. But that's only if the person goes into what the person is seeking. I can only speak for what I know, and what I know is that teaching discipline is about what he says. What he says it isn't about being able to live without reliance on certain pleasures. It's not that you can't stop accepting them, and being skilled or unskilled doesn't make you any better or worse. I'm definitely tired. You know, it's been nearly an hour, and since I'm not adequately conveying my thoughts, I think that it would be better if I kept my thoughts to myself, proceeding, at least for this video. I mean, you've heard enough of just my headspace in general from the lengthy introduction. So, unless I just really feel the need to get something off of my chest as I progress through Mr. LeVay's work, I'm just going to be reading in a straightforward manner. I feel like I've been pulled into my own relaxed aura here and want to just drift away, drift away, drift away, drift away, drift away, drift away, drift away. But we have our duties to uphold, self-imposed duties. Duties, duties, duties. What duties are not self-imposed? Standards belong to everyone, but only the individual is bound to their own standards, and thus the development of higher standards in each individual is important. Forgiveness and knowledge of forgiveness. Forgiveness can be hard or can be easy. I feel like forgiveness is a muscle. When somebody, or yourself for that matter, breaks their standards, goes against what's right, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not angry or upset with yourself anymore. But forgiveness allows you to push forward. That's something I've been meaning to explore, about the meaning of forgiveness and I feel like, just going off of what my heart is telling me right now, that forgiveness is welcoming other back into self, which probably doesn't make a lot of sense unless you've listened to me ramble quite a bit. But in another manner of speaking, when you are mad at yourself, you are seeing yourself as an other and judging their actions, the yourself, as an attack on you. And this also applies to people with whom you don't share a body. We contain multitudes, you know. Demonic delights. Anyway. Your kin, I think, is a good way. When you are angry at someone, no longer recognizing them as your family, your kin. No, well, not when you're angry at somebody, when you don't forgive them. What is the state of not being forgiven? Because it definitely puts you in a mental category. it has to be otherness. Because when you don't forgive someone, that is where hatred is. You can't hate someone if you've forgiven them. And in instances where you hate qualities instead of the person as a whole, I think I've recognized that a lot in my life, where it seems like somebody's always on edge, ready to snap at someone, or highly judgmental of very particular behaviors. It's because they hate those behaviors and do not forgive them, even though they do forgive the person presenting those behaviors. That all sounds cohesive to me. I'm thinking about the type of people, the way that they live their lives, who I've noticed being unable to forgive behaviors. What do I hate? I don't hate hypocrisy. It makes me mad, but you can be mad at yourself. I don't hate it because I recognize it as a sickness or a confusion. Badness is a sickness and confusion. What do I hate? Let me just get into if you'll indulge me, get into a hateful mindset so that I can focus my hate and really hone in on what hatred is like. I lived in a state of constant self-hatred for many years. So I guess that's just demonstration of how differently I've become, different I've become. I guess this would be the opposite of loving kindness meditation. It's hard. It's hard to hate. How dare you? You want to be me? This doesn't conform. It's taking a lot of strain. It's taking a lot of strain to get the anger out of me. Probably because in tiredness, it's lack of energy to change. To change is to kill, and to not change is to be dead. So that's just another reflection of the eternal mystery. But back on topic. Yeah, it seems like it is consistent. When I get angry, I see a thing as other. I begin to hate it, and then it's just a reflexive thing that barely get to the point where I'm able to see it. And then when I recognize the thing in the myriad of qualities that it possesses, that I'm able to find a connection and love to it once again. You know, that's the thing. Hatred being born out of love is, I don't think that hatred is essential. Anger is certainly essential. But hatred is the boundary, the border of where the mind takes you. When you reach hatred, then that is the definition of what is you, and thus the end of expansion. And by becoming more and more familiar with your internal avenues, rivers, roads, pathways, rails, that it gets harder and harder to reach a dead end, because you can just take another way around for the river in another place and end up facing back where you were standing before, looking the other way, looking at the things in yourself that you hate, things in yourself that you hated, and you can remember what it was like back then. I'm friends with a lot of homeless folk. I'm nearly homeless myself at the moment. In a sense. I don't want to go into detail here, but I have seen that there, as someone who's been homeless for large swaths of time in their life, very uncharitable to beggars. And I don't understand, considering, would you not have kindness towards them and their situation as someone who's understood it and knows that there is good inside of them? And his response to that was, I remember what I was like at that time, and I hated myself. I hate what I was at that time, so I don't want to provide for them. And that's a very interesting idea, that how he progressed forward. I'm too tired to put this into words right now, but I think I'm going to have to review this section of the video later, because he's someone who's also explained to me that, well, this is not something that need be explained to anyone, but we contain multitudes, and in this person's case, they show different sides of themselves, different truths, different pasts to different people, because he doesn't know who or how he can trust. And I feel like he mentions the person that he used to be, someone to be hated. But I take the alternate route that that's a person to be pitied that needs help. And I guess denying charity is one way of helping them. But recognizing that they are you, and that you are them, is one way to go about it. For people who have self-hatred, this is actually not a good way to go about it, because if you hate yourself, learn the other is their self, then you can pass the hatred that you have for yourself onto them, so that you're both othered from yourself and othered from your fellow humankind. You'd have to come at it from the other angle, that there are people who have qualities that you love and qualities that you don't love, but you love them anyway, and that you can see them past their faults. And loving them that way, why can't you love yourself the same way? Understanding that you are not defined by your faults. Of course, you've got to also go to stop pride from taking control. You are not defined by your virtues. And I've said several times, you are not defined by your ideas. And your look is just an expression of your own idea. And your body was not something that you chose. You keep going down and down and down into it. And progressing, you lose your identity. And what's left is love for a lot of things that are other, and a sense of gratitude and humility for all the ways that you've been blessed. Just to the blessing of being able to attempt to recognize yourself in the first place. The persona, the mask. I am an anime nerd to the point where it is a compulsion. And so I'm trying to stop. My one compulsion that I allow to become an indulgence. What the hell is this video? Who's gonna watch this? I guess in the future, when my mother has dementia, I can put this on while I'm in the other room. Ah, that is terrible. Shame on me. I love you, Mother. Mob Psycho 100. This is embarrassing to say, but I'm just embarrassing myself over and over again in these videos. But I learned so much about how to live a good life and about progressing, about fulfillment of the self and about compassion and self-love and so much else from this series, this comic book about a 14-year-old boy. Well, that was not conducive to sleep. My apologies. Alright, I grabbed the wrong box, but this works. Through Code Geass, and there are a lot more narrative flaws with this series, and also, in some sense, you feel like what the series is leading towards is an endorsement of anarchism and about individualistic human pursuit, but in the end, it in a weird way just goes back to the status quo, and I feel like it's a betrayal of the message of the whole series. Like, in Akito, the Exiled, it's about people, it's a lot about the self and the other, and it's I could talk about the philosophical and political implications of this cartoon show for hours and hours and hours and hours. But I just bring it up because Code Geass recognizes that there is one mind, and that one mind, the collective unconscious, this is Jungian terminology, is what makes all of us up in different balances and insofar as our biology allows us to tap into it. And I would say that this isn't even unique to humans. I would say that this extends to all manners, and I do mean manners and types of intelligence, regardless of sentience, and so on and so forth. But what we end up doing, what we end up becoming, even when we reach the end and we've lost all of our identity, is our persona. Masks are a very powerful symbol in Code Geass, and in particular, this hungry, excited thing, this symbol that is supposed to be a pupil. This mask is unfinished. I haven't tied the strings on it yet. This symbol is related to Code Geass. It's about the fulfillment of dreams and desires, indulgences and compulsions, be they wholesome or not. And also Akito the Exiled, which is a lovely companion piece to the main Code Geass show. My one little anime robot here. Don't worry, they're not missing their hands. They just fell off and I haven't bothered sticking them back in yet. Probably use glue. Could probably use a paint job, glue, a lot of things. However, they are here on the head, missing their clavicle. I have no idea where it went. It makes me sad that this poor robot person will never have their clavicle. You can see the strange shape here of the cockpit. I love insects, and I particularly love these robots, Alexander's mecha, if you want to use the nerdy term. Particularly love these mecha because these can turn into, through a degree of finagling and some extra parts, like this more insect-like form. Spider-like, maybe? No, insect-like, because there's even a way here to attach additional arms that you can actually be a hexapod. There we go. I wanted to make ASMR about the creation of this model, which I've mangled. I had them like posed in this, no, I'm going down. And I wanted to give them one of their rifles, like, I'm going down, but I'm still holding my weapon type of pose. yeah, when they turn into an insect, you gotta remove the clavicle. I guess the last time I transformed it, I lost track of that, so shame on me. Removed their torso on accident. Let me stand them up straight now. Very rarely do the robots in the Code Geass universe use rails. They're off the rails just like my thought processes. But they do have these on their feet. Wheels. They have their own kind of fancy name for the wheels that they give to robots, but they're wheels. Just funny. Like calling robots mecha instead of robots, but I guess mecha comes with the connotation that there's going to be a pilot and all the rest. I hope that you enjoyed that little aside. Honestly, I'm not sure why you would still be here if you didn't enjoy all of my little asides. At this point, I'm thinking that the Satanic Bible is the aside, and this is just an excuse for me to talk into a camera. That's not how it began. Cross my heart. Oh, such is Levitakewa, such is life. Oh, such is Levitakewa, such is life. Oh, such is Levitakewa, such is life. Ah, such is Levitakewa, such is life. Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Do you know who I am? Do I know who you are? See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Oh, we are of the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We are of the fire, living in the fire. Go back to the fire, turn the world around. We are of the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We are of the water, living in the water. Go back to the water, turn the world around. We are of the mountain, living on the mountain. Go back to the mountain, turn the world around. We are of the mountain, go back to the mountain. We are of the mountain, turn the world around. Water forms the river, river wash the mountain. Fire is the sunlight, turn the world around. Water is the spirit, body is the mountain. Fire is the spirit, turn the world around. We are of the spirit, truly of the spirit. Go back. Truly of the spirit, only can the spirit turn the world around. We are of the spirit, truly of the spirit, only can the spirit turn the world around. Oh, so is life, ah, so is life. Oh, so is life, ah, so is life. That may have gone on a little too long, but that's commitment and determination. Or is it? I don't know. I feel like once I started, I mean, I have to go to the end. I mean, otherwise I don't like half doing things. I get committed and I go all the way through. And that helps me. Often, it hurts me. I guess that's something that I've got to learn about how to become committed in a more fruitful manner. Because, just going back, I become committed to beautiful but silly things like video games. I get committed to comic books. No, that's not a silly thing. I get committed to my friends, to the people I love. I mean, love is at the center of commitment. Love is at the center of everything. Or, no, void is at the center of everything. Love is the impetus for every part of the mind. Hence why hate is at the borders. That actually. You might know something else from Jungian metaphysics or Jungian ontology. No, it'd be metapsychology? I don't even know. Jungian ideas that there are the archetypes. And I'll go so far as to say they're normally mapped onto a circle and about how they move on, how ideas exist as themselves and then enter into human consciousness and evolve and change over the centuries in between cultures, but remain essentially the same. Well, I have a similar idea, except it's the nodes of the mind itself that you can define the mind of the universe into characters. Not any one particular node, of course, is a character, because in order for there to be thought, there needs to be interplay. And from my spiritual experience, I think I titled the video, you should see this, I was doing the perfect dance. I hesitate to call it that, but uncontrolled by myself, you might call this a possession, my body was moving across. I don't want to do that again. I don't want to get stuck in that cycle. Mapping out each part of the human mind as it is represented, as it is present within this body. I think, sadly, the portion of it caught on video. Let's see. It was, if this is your point of reference, it was between here down. This is something I noticed. I'm not sure if I know that various parts of my body were used in the perfect dance, but it was primarily my hands. It would like come up here and then fall out, and come up here and then fall out again, like leaving the circle. Like right here is becoming is one way to put it, and it's actually a destructive force. I mean, this is where you can find Satan, all of the very hateful devils. And the way to defeat them, of course, is to recognize them as your kin and love them and yourself. I had an alternate personality for many years, and I've actually found them within this cycle. I look forward to reconnecting with them now that I'm not forced to share space with them anymore, but they're up here. I named them Thorn, but I don't think that'd be right. I'm getting so far off topic. But this is clearly something that I hold of great importance. I also recognize that these ideas that I'm bringing to you aren't scientific. All ideas are scientific, just a matter of if they're treated with the scientific process. I guess what I have right here is a hypothesis, that I need to find a method of testing, and I actually do plan to do that during my next possession. I'm going to run a series of tests to see what exactly is going on here. But the borders of the mind aren't necessarily borders at every single place. Like over here at this end point of the circle is unbecoming. Dying, you might even say. Well, over here is unbecome, which is honestly more a force for knowledge. Like the more unbecoming, it's the less knowing, while unbecome is when it's all over, it's when you're able to touch it. You can't touch something, no, I guess you can't grasp something that's being ripped away from you, but once it has been ripped away, you can see it for what it was, which I guess is related to the phrase that unknowing is knowing, when you're able to detach the object from the idea of the object. C'est pas une main, or this is not a hand. This is an image of a hand to you, but is it a hand to me? It used to be a bowl of rice. Before that it was stardust. You can know those things because they're not. You can know this because it's not. By the time you even perceive something, it is already dead. But those things work. Something can't unbecome, can't go through the process of unbecoming if it is not already unbecome. And likewise, becoming is a natural source of become, but you can't have become without becoming, and vice versa. And it's actually by falling down into the heart of becoming, the devourer, it's easy to immediately snap right back into become, which is because this is related to this and this is related to this, in a sense, dead, in the way that Mr. LeVay was saying about how denying your growth and being untrue to your nature. But our nature is both. Our nature is everything and also nothing. I forget what point I was trying to make. Oh yeah. No. All right. I'd like another cup of tea. You know, sorry, keeping my voice down. I feel like if anyone does listen to this, you are indulging me. And for that, I thank you. I'm not sure if you actually came here to hear this book or not. You know, I don't think that you came here to hear this book, because there are lots of ways to do that. I think that you came here, and that you stayed here, because even if we've never met, you've got a personal investment in, at the very least, my narrative of what kind of kooky, nonsensical thing is this person going to say next? How long can they just blabber into a camera? Are they ever going to collapse in front of me? Or perhaps you're interested in regardless of my philosophy, perhaps you're here for the vibe of that's something that I have worked to cultivate, of that you're welcome here. The Happy New Day. I hope you're doing well. It's genuine, and I hope you can feel that. Even if you're someone that I know, and I'm currently angry at the moment, like we went over earlier, I don't hate you. And I hope that you're doing well in whatever I'm angry at you for. I hope you overcome it, or I learn that it's not something I should be angry about. I want a cup of tea. More. You know, I'm compelled to get tea, but really all I need is hot water. There we go. I've got 2 kettles because my family was using my kettle far too much for other things, and I didn't always have fair access to it. So they have the kettle downstairs, and I have this one. I like this one far less than the first one that I got for myself. It's plastic. Sometimes it has a bit of a plasticky taste. I had to cleanse it out for nearly a week before that went away. It doesn't contain as much, it empties out far faster, and also tea is very temperature sensitive. I guess I'm a snob, but it's true. The leaves, in order to bring out the best, most delicate flavors, requires delicate attention to temperature. And once this thing boils, it stays hot for a long time. It's thermally protected. So my water is very hot, even though it's been over an hour since I turned it on. Satanists are encouraged to indulge even in the 7 deadly sins, as they need hurt no one. They were only invented by the Christian Church to ensure guilt on the part of its followers. The Christian Church knows that it is impossible for anyone to avoid committing these sins, as they are all things for which we, being human, most naturally do. After inevitably committing these sins, financial offerings to the church in order to pay off God are employed as a sop to the parishioner's conscience. Satan has never needed a book of rules, because vital natural forces have kept man sinful and intent on preserving himself and his feelings. Nevertheless, demoralizing attempts have been made on his body and being for his soul's sake, which only illustrate how misconceived and misused the labels of indulgence versus compulsion have become. Sexual activity certainly is condoned and encouraged by Satanism, but the obvious fact that it is the only religion which honestly takes this stand is the reason it has been traditionally given so much literary space. Naturally, if most people belong to religions which repress them sexually, anything written on this provocative subject is going to make for titillating reading. If all attempts to sell something, be it a product or an idea, have failed, sex will always sell it. The reason for this is that even though people now consciously accept sex as a normal and necessary function, their subconscious is still bound by the taboo which religion has placed upon it. So again, what is denied is more intensely desired. It is this bugaboo regarding sex which causes the literature devoted to the satanic views on the subject to overshadow all else written about Satanism. The true Satanist is not mastered by sex any more than he is mastered by any of his other desires. As with all other pleasurable things, the Satanist is the master of, rather than mastered by, sex. He is not the perverted fiend who is just waiting for the opportunity to deflower every young virgin, nor is he the skulking degenerate who furtively hangs around the dirty bookstores, slavering over the nasty pictures. If pornography fills his needs for the moment, he unashamedly buys some choice items and guiltlessly peruses them at his leisure. We have to accept the fact that man has become disgruntled at being constantly repressed, but we must do everything we can to at least temper the sinful desires of man, lest they run rampant in this new age, say the religionists of the right-hand path to the questioning Satanist. Why continue to think of these desires as shameful and something to be repressed if you now admit they are natural, returns the Satanist. Could it be that the white light religionists are a bit sour grapes about the fact they didn't think of a religion before the Satanists which would be enjoyable to follow? And if the truth were known, would they too not like to have a bit more pleasure out of life for fear of losing face, but for fear of losing face cannot admit it? Could it also be that they are afraid people will, after hearing about Satanism, tell themselves, "This is for me. Why should I continue with a religion which condemns me for everything I do, even though there is nothing actually wrong with it?" The Satanist thinks this is more than likely true. Learning to feel love on a deeper level and express love as well, feeling love and not expressing it is just evidence of it not being true love. Feeling love, feeling connectedness and oneness, and this is something that even I, as someone who does not approve of any particular Abrahamic religion, this is something that I admire, the sense of community in a congregation and losing yourself in the swell of passion and dedication to an idea, I think is truly beautiful. And I feel like what a lot of saints say about learning to live every moment of life in prayer, every breath that you take to be a prayer, every thought that you have recontextualized through prayer and through love and through praise of God. I feel like God is a concept that needs to be very carefully defined. But this is a pleasure that is immense. This is the pleasure of heaven that can absolutely be felt on earth, the same way that hell can be felt on earth. To be one with God, to be at his right hand and his left, and in the chair, knowing that it is your will which brought you to exactly where you are, and loved, and all the rest, but also recognizing how small you are and how you can hardly even see and recognize yourself when you're around God. It's hard for me to put into my words. I guess and I don't mean this as like a thing putting myself above. I think you can tell I have a very strong sense of self-deprecation, like despite not talking about anything practical for nearly 2 hours. um, I hope that I've been able to convey a sense of down-to-earthness. um, but I'm feeling rather godly at the moment, and so it's hard to look at things from Donald's perspective. I mean, I recognize that I'm completely Donald, and that I'm only the universe in the sense that the universe is incomplete without me, in the same way that the universe is incomplete without any of you, dear listeners, or any of this silly paraphernalia. But I can love all of the silly paraphernalia. I can love that this plan, this, I'm not sure if you can call it a plan, this necessary function of the universe to lose and discover itself, that is essential to all of being, sentient or not, is wonderful. To be thankful for both positive and hurtful experiences, even if they don't teach you something, that you have been granted the opportunity to experience that pain. And I guess that's where a sense of masochism is important. Being able to relish pain for pain's sake, to be able to find the pleasure in what hurts you. And also, people usually fall into one role or the other, but sadism also, you can't be a good sadist unless you also have empathy and an understanding of the pain that you're causing. And the thought of, in a very real way, for the sadist, inflicting pain on the other is inflicting pain on yourself and a way of moving past it even. Self-flagellation, it might not be a sexual thing for a lot of people. It's in a lot of ways a religious thing, but pursuing that non-sexual pleasure through pain is definitely one way of coming closer to God. And calling it masochism, it's like the feeling of getting lost. Getting lost, not knowing where you are, but wanting to be somewhere is, I guess, the pain in that aspect. Wanting to be somewhere and not being able to find your way is, in a very real sense, learning how to enjoy being where you are and not knowing where you are, but knowing you are here. Being able to know that home is an idea that you can apply to any situation, and that unless you can find home within your own heart and mind, that you can't find home anywhere. And that's sad too. People who can't be at home with themselves, they'll never have homes, they'll just have houses that shelter them from the elements, but don't shelter them emotionally. And I guess that's another reflection of being lost. So I want to help those people, but I guess they're on their own path, that they're lost without their emotional home, and that's their way of being pushed towards recognizing that they are their own home and being present in the moment. You are the place that you are at. You are, we are the universe. And I could talk about that for forever, and not talk about that for forever, but it will never not be communicated because it's being sung, being shouted by all of creation. And even when you turn away from it, it's being sung, being screamed at you. And even when you don't hear it, it is still happening. And you can say that it's your own mind that is relating instances and coincidences and interpreting them in a particular way to form this narrative. But if something is internally consistent and doesn't interfere with a person's, or even helps a person to progress forward in life, like, what is a delusion? For something to be a delusion, it has to be provably false. Also, for something to be scientific, it needs to be testable. Something that isn't provably false, but also, I don't know, there are ways to test. Have I even finished one chapter? No, I haven't. This feels good. Just being able to share this time with you. Even if no one else watches this video. Because I've been so focused on so much recently that being functionally alone like this, it's a breath of fresh air. Maybe that's something that will allow me to focus in the future, be able to master my compulsions, is learning how to be alone in a task, how to explore a task, because I'm not really, when I'm in something, I'm very fond of giving massages. I was giving one of my friends a massage a while back, and they're a very beautiful person, and I needed to take myself out of the mindfulness of being aroused, because neither of us are interested in pursuing that kind of relationship, but that doesn't mean I can't be aroused and not give consent. But regardless, in order to focus and take myself out of the state of being aroused and wanting to touch them with sexual intent, I just had to lose myself in the act of giving them a damn good massage, which I damn well can do. And perhaps that's a method I can try next time I'm doing something I don't want to do, losing myself in the task. I think that's part of how video games get to me too, because there are many parts of video games which are just simply not pleasant. grinding, going up to the boss over and over and over again. And the challenge, when you're actively engaged in it, that's the thing, it's the engagement. If you can get engaged in the challenge, then that's what makes it fun. When you can lose yourself in the, I gotta get back there, I've got to get back there so I can fight them again, so I can get this achievement, so I can get this piece of lore or story or item. I'm thinking of Dark Souls. I'm on a new game. I'm not sure if it's plus or plus plus. And I'm on Ornstein and Smo. I'll just, to paint a picture here, I built a character specifically to use all of the 4 Knights gear. And that's what it became. It started out as a character specifically to use, what's their name? Artorias gear. And the sword of Artorias, it uses the dex stat, it uses the strength stat, it uses the intelligence stat, and it uses the faith stat. And when you're building a character, usually it's good to focus on only 2 of any of those. Otherwise, you can't properly have enough resources to excel at any of them, and that's the case. So what I've done is I've got the character, it's just barely enough to use all of Artorias gear, but then I also increased that to the 4 Knights because they don't have really wild requirements for all of their gear, but also they're not going to be very useful unless you increase your stats to the point where you can be proficient with the gear. At least gives me more options. Like, I think you need 18 dexterity, which is the highest requirement to wield the silver tracer and gold tracer of the assassin character. What's her name? Like one of the highest dex stats out there for a purely dexterity weapon. But to wield the greatsword of Artorias, you need 20 dexterity. But for a dexterity weapon to be really any good, you need to be up in the 30s and 40s. I was very lucky my first playthrough that I went purely into pyromancy, which is separate from all of the other leveling systems. And I ended up using a dexterity-based flame sword because I was really into the role-playing of being a pyromancer. Kalog's something blade, I don't know, Chaos Blade. The Chaos Blade is its own thing. But it's really lucky. I knew that if I wanted to cast the fastest pyromancy, I needed high dexterity. But that also gave me access to dexterity weapons, and it just so happens that the pyromancy sword, which is one of the best dex weapons there is, also happens to be a dex sword, a pyromancy sword. It all just melded together very well. I'll never forget how good it felt my first time overcoming the gargoyle sentries, or bell gargoyles, for the first time. I wore that hat with pride. That helmet, you get a helmet when you defeat the gargoyles. Sometimes. You didn't come in here for all this video game nerdiness. Once again, I'm probably speaking to no one. learned to be at home alone, to entertain myself with my own mind, because we do contain multitudes. And by expressing an idea, especially when you are a highly skeptical person, it can also be like having, if you're second guessing yourself, a conversation with another person in some ways. I'm going to finish this one ding-dang chapter. I see the end. It's on the very next page. It's very interesting. It's the choice of human sacrifice. But I'm going to finish this chapter and be done for tonight. I guess, since this is a sleep aid, it's alright that we're departing from the formula that was established. You can even say it was established. We have to accept the fact that man has become disgruntled at being constantly repressed, but we must do everything we can to at least temper the sinful desires of man, lest they run rampant in this new age. Skipping ahead. Could it also be that they are afraid people will, after hearing about Satanism, tell themselves, "This is for me, why should I continue with a religion which condemns me for everything I do, even when there is nothing wrong with it?" The Satanist thinks this is more than likely true. There is certainly much evidence that past religions are, every day, lifting more and more of their ridiculous restrictions. Even so, when an entire religion is based on abstinence instead of indulgence, as it should be, there is little left when it has been revised to meet the current needs of man. So why waste time buying oats for a dead horse? The watchword of Satanism is indulgence instead of abstinence, but it is not compulsion. How long is the choice of human sacrifice? It's 4 pages. If I were reading to myself, that's like a minute and a half. When I'm performing it to you, that can apparently be up to 2 hours. So I'm done for now. Thankfully, the person I lent my book to hasn't had a lot of time to read recently either, so it's not like they want this back anytime soon. I wish you love and peace. Remember,